us working at the consumer and retail track at TECHNIA, we are around 25 people. So most of us are either technical experts, and if we're not, like me, we usually have a background in consumer products related industries, such as fashion, retail, and others. So first of all, she's not here, but I would like to thank Rebecca Carlson for introducing circular economy and talking about exponential tech, because I think that fits very good with what we will focus on today. And I think the difference is that we will go down more on concrete level and looking at solutions to actually do this with technology today. So thank you for joining this session. We have done our best to give you inspiration and share this passion on a subject that is very important to us, sustainability. I will start to share my story on why I'm standing here today, talking about this subject today. So my name is Lindfred, and I work with business development for the consumer retail team at TECHNIA. And looking back around 3 years ago, I was together with a colleague from TECHNIA introduced to the concept or the framework of circular economy. My colleague's name is Alessandro. He's from Italy, and we both got very interested and very passionate on a personal level about circular economy. But it wasn't until after a few weeks, one dark, very cold evening after work, when we got into this overpacked bar on Södermalm with lots of people, when, you know, there's so much beer drinking and talking going on, so it starts to get foggy on the inside of the windows. So I wish I remember more from that night, but I remember that me and Alessandro had this napkin moment. So, you know, when you start drawing out your ideas on napkins for hours. And in short, what we realized was that what we do for work can play an important role as an enabler for the circular economy. So, of course, this night was really important to us, but in short, why? So, we had a lot of discussions before this, and it had become quite apparent to us that the system which we live by today, the linear economy, isn't really sustainable long term. It's maybe not the system for the future, even though it might have treated us very well with industrialization, curing diseases, increasing standards of living, and so on. So we felt that circular economy gave us, in a quite structured way, the tools and the mindset of getting out of this way of thinking. But before going deeper into the concept of circular economy, let's go through some background. So traveling back in time, some decades. So we're now in the 18th century in the UK. The Industrial Revolution has kicked off, and we all read about it in school. But one metric that is important to remember today is that when the UK started the Industrial Revolution, they were around 10 million people, and it took them 150 years to double their GDP per capita. So 10 million people, 150 years to double their GDP per capita. In the 19th century, the US was in the industrialization game. They also started out with around 10 million people, and they doubled their GDP per capita in 50 years. And going back to now, it has taken China and India 12 and 16 years to do the same thing. The only thing is that they started out with a combined population of 1.8 billion people. So that is 200 times as many people and 10 times the speed of the UK scenario, which means that the new demand hitting the market is estimated to be 2,000 times higher. And using other ways of measuring or presenting this data, you can also say that it's estimated that the world middle class, so the world consuming middle class, will double in the next 10 years by 2030. And at the same time, or as a consequence, the demand of natural resources will increase. So this is a prediction for the next 20 years. Steel is expected, or the demand for steel is expected to increase by 57%, energy by 32%, water 137%, and agricultural land by 200%. And taking one example then, or one concrete example, this is from the textiles industry, of this anticipated increased demand. In 2016, the demand for virgin textile fiber, so to supply the demand of textile products, was 90 million tons globally. 90 million tons is 3 times as much as the demand was in the 1980s. And an estimation has been made by the UN that we will need 200 to 250 million tons to supply the growing global demand within the next 10 years. So is that sustainable, or is that doable with the current system that we have, or do we need a rethink? So that was the demand and some background. So the demand increases, but we still have what at least I think is underutilized systems in place for products and services. So for example, overproduction. 30% of all produced clothes are never sold, and another 30% are sold with a discount. 80% of all consumer products end up in landfill, and this was a study made in Europe a couple of years ago. And actually, the previous speakers spoke a lot about cars and mobility, and I guess most of us in here, we own a car, at least I do. And looking at the car from a product perspective, car manufacturers have for a century or so optimized the process of building a car. But what if we look at the car from a system? For example, we saw solar-powered cars that could drive by themselves, for example. But if we look at the system for mobility today, how optimized and effective is that? So the average European car is parked 92% of its lifetime. And actually another 3% of that time is lost due to congestion and looking for parking and so on. So the car is actually only driven productively around 5% of its lifetime. And then only with an average of 1.5 persons inside of the 5 seats occupied. So if you do that calculation, you end up with a utilization rate of maybe 2%. And that's not very effective. And we're going to talk about packaging and plastics today. And packaging, according to some studies, accounts for 40% of all the plastics that we use globally. That is around 78 million tons every year. And even though plastic is a material which lasts for maybe 100 years or more, we only use it once. Or actually, 2%, I think, of the plastic that we use for packaging today is recycled in this closed loop system. So it's reused over and over again. But unfortunately, 1/3 of these 78 million tons every year actually leaks from the system. So it leaks into nature and it leaks into our oceans. And it is anticipated that if we don't change anything, so in a business as usual scenario, oceans are expected to contain more plastics than fish by 2050. So since industrialization, we have optimized the system that is based on this idea of an unlimited supply of raw material. So the mindset has, by some scientists, been labeled as maximized throughput. Pretty good definition. So we have some cases. There are, of course, many, many more. But I would like to conclude the now with this citation from a former McKinsey consultant. He was a co-founder of starting their sustainability practice 20 years ago. And he says that our economy has today grown so big, so fast, that it is quickly depleting the very same natural capital on which it thrives. So in a way, it is falling victim to its own success. So next, I would like to share a very short video made by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that explains the core of the circular economy concept that also Rebecca mentioned before. Let's see.
Living systems have been around for a few billion years and will be around for many more. In the living world, there's no landfill. Instead, materials flow. One species' waste is another's food, energy is provided by the sun, things grow, then die, and nutrients return to the soil safely. And it works. Yet as humans, we've adopted a linear approach. We take, we make, and we dispose. A new phone comes out, so we ditch the old one. Our washing machine packs up, so we buy another. Each time we do this, we're eating into a finite supply of resources and often producing toxic waste. It simply can't work long term. So what can? If we accept that the living world's cyclical model works, can we change our way of thinking so that we too operate a circular economy? Let's start with the biological cycle. How can our waste build capital rather than reduce it? By rethinking and redesigning products and components, and the packaging they come in, we can create safe and compostable materials that help grow more stuff. As they say in the movies, no resources have been lost in the making of this material. So what about the washing machines, mobile phones, fridges? We know they don't biodegrade. Here, we're talking about another sort of rethink, a way to cycle valuable metals, polymers, and alloys so they maintain their quality and continue to be useful beyond the shelf life of individual products. What if the goods of today became the resources of tomorrow? It makes commercial sense. Instead of the throw away and replace culture we've become used to, we'd adopt a return and renew one, where products and components are designed to be disassembled and regenerated. One solution may be to rethink the way we view ownership. What if we never actually owned our technologies? We simply licensed them from the manufacturers. Now, let's put these two cycles together. Imagine if we could design products to come back to their makers, their technical materials being reused and their biological parts increasing agricultural value. And imagine that these products are made and transported using renewable energy. Here we have a model that builds prosperity long term. And the good news is, there are already companies out there who are beginning to adopt this way of working. But the circular economy isn't about one manufacturer changing one product. It's about all the interconnecting companies that form our infrastructure and economy coming together. It's about energy. It's about rethinking the operating system itself. We have a fantastic opportunity to open new perspectives and new horizons. Instead of remaining trapped in the frustrations of the present, with creativity and innovation, we really can rethink and redesign our future.
The linear economy, our mindset on products up until now, is, of course, we take a raw material, we give it some value through manufacturing processes, some marketing and so on, and we sell it to another actor, usually a consumer, and then transfer the ownership to the consumer who uses the product and then at some point disposes of the product. And as you can see here in my detailed graph, the linear economy then creates a lot of waste. The circular economy, however, wants to help us loop those materials and often valuable materials back into the cycle and maybe create new products or find another use for them at a later stage. And the framework is based on the concepts of reuse, remanufacturing, recycling, maintenance, refurbishment, and redistribution. And apart from helping us to maintain our lifestyle without pushing the natural systems as much, I also believe it can open up our minds to new business models and even more long-term profit for companies. So taking one example is mud jeans. So I've taken them as an example for many, many times, and they've been around for many years. And their business model is renting out jeans. So the cost is around €7 per month, and you can exchange for another pair. I think it's €20 extra fee. And who doesn't currently have 5 or 10 jeans lying in the closet without being used because you don't like them anymore or they don't fit as well as before, for example? So Mud then, if you send a pair of jeans back to them, will take care of the jeans, either sell them again as vintage or do something with the raw material, either upcycle into another product or downcycle into a more simple product like filling material, for example. So in short, what Mud is doing is that they're trying to make money on the same raw material over and over again. And we're going to talk about packaging today. And Replenish is a company that I think has a very good system or idea. They're thinking in systems. And they have created this system where you don't need to ship water and plastic around the world just because you need a simple product like a cleaner or a detergent, for example. And in context of reusable packaging, I think there is a very nice business case presented by Pepsi, who last year bought SodaStream for, I think, $3.2 billion, which is basically the same amount as Ford paid for Volvo cars 10 years ago or so. So I think they also see the business opportunity of this new way of thinking. So relating this back to what we're doing here, IT systems and digital disruption and so on, I think that it has been established that one of the hardest parts of going from a linear business model to a circular business model is to handle all the complexity. Complexity in processes, material flows, mindsets of people, laws and regulations, and many more. So this picture is quite complex picture of the textile value chain or upstream supply chain. It is from the industry, our Outdoor Industry Association, and they usually use this picture to make a point on that it is not simple. It is quite complex, even though it's just a garment or a piece of cloth or maybe a shoe. And this is the linear supply chain. So imagine if we want to make this circular. So we want to have materials flows, we want to have reverse logistics, we want to know what happens to a product during its use for maybe 10 years, then we take it back and do something else with it. So, of course, then having a system to help us will, as Rebecca said, help us to exponentially grow into this business model and actually realize it and handle all of this data and process flow. But going back to the start of my presentation, so I introduced you to Alessandro, my Italian colleague. And after working together on circular economy with him for around a year, he actually left TECHNIA. His passion was maybe a little bit more Italian than mine. So what he did was actually he did a master's in environmental science, then he enrolled a PhD studying local micro-social systems in Italy. This summer I spoke to him. He actually lived in a hippie community, so they lived for, I think they had 100 euros to live for each month. So not consuming like we do here in society today. And to say something about Alessandro, before he joined TECHNIA, he was a management consultant traveling the world, consulting governments on initiating new airlines and planning new airports. So trying to relate back to me then, so why I'm not living with hippies, but still claiming that my passion and conviction about this, let it be a little bit more Swedish, is as great as Alessandro's. So I'm here today doing this presentation and working for TECHNIA with PLM because I truly believe that IT and digitalization will be a game changer to change our future, going from linear to circular and all of the other things that we want to do. And of course, to name something, so there are many studies showing, for example, that early decisions in the design phase of a product has a huge impact at later stages when you want to reuse it or recycle it, for example. And that is exactly what we cover with a PLM system, for example. We have all the information, we have the raw materials, we have the different components, the different parts. We have all of that information. We just need to learn how to treat it differently to really leverage that data for our products. And throughout this seminar, we will hear examples on how PLM and other systems can facilitate sustainable innovation in different ways. So we will hear about blockchain, we will hear about IoT, 3D design, simulation. We will hear about Arla, how they realize that the PLM system can actually help them a lot on the sustainability. But I would like to end my presentation with another citation from the same McKinsey guy that I mentioned before. I really like him. And he says that we have the most powerful tool in history, so PLM, right at our fingertips. So of course he means disruptive technologies and digitalization. And he also says that it's up to us to use it for something good.